asked Google what are the formulas for calculating the sample size for a case control study and a cohort study, and guess what? The response I got, the results were overwhelming. Then I head to YouTube, which is obviously where we are, and ask the same question. Now on YouTube, I got some videos that were specifically showing me formulas to calculate case control. The majority of them were telling me how to get the variables. For example, someone is saying, this is how you get your P1, this is where you get your P2, this is where you get your Z alpha, this is where you get your Z beta. But the thing is, I wanted to know what is the function of Z alpha in that formula? What is the function of Z beta in that formula? And also, some of these formulas look similar, but some variables are kind of different, which is kind of confusing to me. So if you've been confused, the objective of this video is to make everything clear to you as much as I can. So by the end of this video, you will be able to know which formula to use for each study design, what the variables mean, and how to calculate your sample size using a realistic health research example. Before we touch any formula, I want to make sure that we are clear on why case control and cohort study cannot use the same study design as a cross-sectional study or a cross-sectional survey. In cross-sectional study, you are looking at proportion, you are looking at the percentage of population that has a certain characteristics, but in a case control and a cohort study, you are dealing with relationships or associations. We are talking about risk, we are talking about exposure and an outcome, and also a comparison between two groups of people. Now, in a case control study, you start with the outcome. You want to recruit people who have a particular disease or a condition to be your cases, and then you want to recruit the other group of people who do not have a particular disease or a condition to become your controls. Your control are healthy people, and your cases are people with a disease. If you work in a hospital, you hear doctors or nurses saying cases of preeclampsia. Also, we have like risk factors that can lead to a particular disease. So what you do in a case control study is that you want to look back and see how many people that have the disease were exposed to that risk factor, and also in the control group, that's a healthy group, how many people were exposed to that same risk factors. Now let me give you a classic example. Let's say that you want to study whether healthcare workers who did not receive hepatitis B vaccine are more likely to develop hepatitis B infection or are more likely to contact hepatitis B infection. So what you're going to do is you're going to recruit nurses or healthcare workers that have hepatitis B, and then those will be your cases. And then you're going to recruit nurses that are healthy, that do not have hepatitis B. This will be your control. Now, the risk here is the vaccination history. For example, if we are studying hepatitis B, we can say that, okay, hepatitis B vaccine helps in protecting us from hepatitis B infection. So if you did not receive the hepatitis B vaccine, that means you are at risk of hepatitis B infection. So the vaccination history is going to serve as your risk. So what you do is we are going to compare the vaccination history of your cases and the vaccination history of your controls. Now, in a cohort study, you flip the direction. You start with the exposure. Now, in cohort study, you recruit people that have been exposed to a particular risk, and another group that has not been exposed to that risk, that are unexposed to that risk. And then you're going to follow both groups in time to see who is going to develop a disease or outcome. So using our hepatitis B example, now in a cohort study, you're going to recruit vaccinated nurses and unvaccinated nurses and follow them in time. You can follow them maybe for 2 years, 5 years, or for 10 years and see who is going to develop hepatitis B infection in the future. Now you see the difference. In case control, you recruit people that already have hepatitis B and who do not have hepatitis B, and try to find out the people that were vaccinated and not vaccinated in both groups. But in a cohort study, you are recruiting people that are vaccinated and unvaccinated, and then you are trying to see who is going to develop hepatitis B infection in both groups. Now you can see that both case control and cohort study deals with comparison, comparing two groups, healthy and unhealthy, or exposed and unexposed. So because of that comparison, the sample size formula has to account for what Cochrane formula do not really account for, which is the ratio between your two groups, the expected event rate and the statistical power to truly detect the difference, if any exists. So now let's look at this formula. So there are three formulas. The first one is the Kelsey formula. We have the fleiss formula and the fleiss formula with continuity correction. I know they look dense, but we are going to define each variable what it means, I'm going to break it down as much as I can. Now, the n in this formula is the sample size. That is what we are trying to determine. We don't know yet what our sample size is going to be. So the n is the number of cases you need to conduct the study. So now the next variable is your Z alpha. Now the Z alpha is your significance level. Now for your significance level, you can decide to use a 90% or 95% or 99% confidence level. So now the Z value depends on whether we are conducting a one-sided or a two-sided test. So if the study is two-sided and then the confidence level is at 95% confidence, the value you are going to use is 1.96. And then if the study is a one-sided test and then your confidence level is still at 95%, the value that you are going to use for your calculation is 1.64. Now, if your study is two-sided, then in your calculation, when you are displaying your formula, you're going to use Z alpha slash 2. But if your study is one-sided, you're just going to use Z alpha. There's no need for the division side or the 2 because it is one-sided. That's the difference. Now, if you have any question regarding what a two-sided or a one-sided test is, feel free to drop it in the comments. Now, in order for you to get this value, you can get it in a standard statistical table online or from a standard reference, like in a paper. But I'm going to explain how to get that value in a separate video. But even if you cannot use the statistical table to get the value yourself, if you search online, you are going to see that the work has already been done. You are going to see this confidence level, so with their corresponding values that you can use in your calculation. Now, let's talk about what the Z alpha actually means, because all this while we've been talking about how to get it, where to get it. So let's talk about what it actually means. Now, what the Z value does for us is that it tells us how careful we want to be before concluding that there is a difference. It protects us from falsely detecting a difference that does not actually exist in our study. Now, let's use this hepatitis B infection example. Now, let's say we set our confidence level at 95%. And we are left with 5%, which is our alpha. Now you convert that alpha to proportion divided by 100, and then it's going to be 0.05. Now this 0.05 is our significance level. So if alpha is set at 0.05, then we are saying that if there is actually no difference between vaccinated and unvaccinated nurses, then this study has a 5% chance of concluding that there is a difference when no difference actually exists. And if we should make this incorrect conclusion, we've made a type 1 error. In this case, we would have rejected the null hypothesis, which states that there is no difference between vaccinated and unvaccinated healthcare workers, and accepted the alternative hypothesis, which states that there is a difference, that is, unvaccinated healthcare workers are at higher risk of developing a hepatitis B virus. Now, let's say we used 99% confidence level. So if you minus 99 from 100, you're going to be left with 1. So if you divide 1 by 100, the answer is going to be 0.01. So alpha will be set at 0.01, which means that we have a 1% chance of incorrectly concluding that there is a difference between vaccinated healthcare workers and unvaccinated healthcare workers, when actually there is no difference. Now, the next variable is your Z beta. Now, the Z beta is related to the power of your study, and the power of the studies are usually set at 80% or 90%. Now, if your power is at 80%, the value that you are going to use for your calculation is 0.84. But if it is set at 90%, the value that you're going to use for your calculation is 1.28. Now, these values are also gotten from standard statistical tables, just like the Z alpha value. So I'm going to explain it in that video together. Now, what the power does is that it tells us how likely we are to detect a real effect or a difference in a study if it truly exists. Now, if your power is set at 80%, it means that if truly a difference exists between the two groups, your study has an 80% chance of detecting that difference. So, using our hepatitis B example, we are saying that if unvaccinated healthcare workers are truly at higher risk of hepatitis B infection, then our study has an 80% chance of detecting that increased risk, that higher risk. Now, this power is directly related to type 2 error. So let's say the power is set at 80. I want to give you an example. So If you remove 80 from 100, it's going to remain 20%. Now we are saying that there is a 20% chance of us failing to detect a real effect when it truly exists. Now, if you fail to detect a real effect, you've made a type 2 error. Now, applying it or relating it to our hepatitis B example, we are saying that vaccination does not make a difference. Whether you are vaccinated or not, it doesn't make a difference when truly there is a difference. Now, the power and type 2 error are complements. Now, if power is set at 80%, it means that a study has an 80% chance of detecting a real effect or a real difference if it exists, and it has a 20% chance of missing that real effect. Or if power is set at 90%, we are saying that our study has a 90% chance of detecting a real effect, and then we have a 10% chance of missing that true difference or that real effect. Now, if we miss that real effect or that difference between vaccinated and unvaccinated healthcare workers, it means that we have failed to reject the null hypothesis, even though a true difference exists, even though unvaccinated healthcare workers are at higher risk. We've missed that effect. Now, the next variable is the P1. Now, the P1 is simply the expected proportion of cases or exposed group depending on your type of study, whether it is a case control or a cohort study. So now let's apply this to our hepatitis B example. So if a study is a case control, the question will be that what proportion of nurses with hepatitis B were unvaccinated? And for cohort study, the question would be what proportion of unvaccinated nurses developed hepatitis B during the study period. So you get this value from a previous published paper similar to yours. So for example, let's say if a paper says that they found that 60% of the cases were unvaccinated, were exposed to the risk factor, which is lack of vaccination. You're going to change it to proportion, which is going to give you 0.6, and that 0.6 is what you're going to use for your calculation. Now the P2 is your comparison group, is the healthy group in a case control or the unexposed group in a cohort study. Now let's say your study is a case control study. The question would be what proportion of nurses without hepatitis B were unvaccinated? If the study is a cohort study, the question would be what proportion of vaccinated nurses developed hepatitis B infection? So let's say a previous paper found 30%. So you're going to convert that to proportion, and then it's going to be 0.3, and that 0.3 is what you are going to use in your calculation. Now, in some formulas, you see P1 and P2, while in some formulas, you're going to see P1 and P0. Now, in both cases, P1 still represents the number of your cases or your exposed group. Then P2 and the P0 are the same thing. They mean the same thing. It is the number or the proportion of your control as far as there is P1. And the next variable that we're talking about is the Q. So in order to get your Q that you're going to use in your calculation, what you're going to do is you're just going to do 1 minus P. So in some formulas, they are going to write directly 1 minus P in the formula, or some formula are going to shorten it and just write Q. So if you see Q in these formulas, it means 1 minus P. So for in the example that I gave, our P1 is 0.6. So if you do 1 minus 0.6, you're going to get 0.4. So that 0.4 is going to serve as your Q. Also, you need to pay attention to see whether the formula has written Q1 or Q2. So if the formula is saying Q1, it means that you're going to do 1 minus P1. Then if the formula is suggesting Q2, you are going to do 1 minus P2 to get your Q2. Now this Q is basically the number or the proportion of the population that do not have what you are studying. So now let me use this hepatitis B example so that you can actually see what I'm talking about. So let's go with the P1. Remember we said that 60% of the cases were unvaccinated, which if you change it to proportion, you're going to get 0.6. If you do 1 minus 0.6, the answer is going to be 0.4. Now, what this means is that 40% of the nurses were actually vaccinated, which means they were not exposed to the risk of hepatitis B infection. Now, the next variable that we want to talk about is the ratio. Now, the ratio is simply the ratio of your control to your cases, if your study is a case control study, or the ratio of unexposed to the exposed group. The ratio is determined by the researcher based on the design and also the feasibility of the study. So, for example, we can ask a question like, how many controls do you need for every case? Which basically means that how many people without hepatitis B do you need for every one person that you are going to recruit that has hepatitis B? Is it 2:1 or 3:1 or 1:1? Some formulas you'll see R, while in some formulas you're going to see M. So both of them mean the same thing. Now let's say I've decided that for every case I want to have two controls. That's 2:1. So I'm going to use 2 in my calculation. Let's say for example the final answer is 50 participants. That's the cases. That means I'm going to need times 2 of that number for my control. So I'm going to recruit 100 people as my control. Altogether, the final sample size is going to be 150 people. Next, let's talk about the P bar or the P star. In some formulas, you see P bar. In some formulas, you see P star. They both mean the same thing. Now, the P star or the P bar is the pooled proportion. It is simply the average proportion across both groups, which is the case group and the control group. So the way you calculate this P star or P bar depends on whether your groups are equal or are unequal. So equal or unequal groups comes in terms of ratio. Yes, one control for every case. That means it is 1:1. So that means if you have 50 cases, you're going to have 50 controls. So you can simply do a simple average. So you can just do your P1 plus P2 divided by 2, and then you're going to get your P star that you are going to use in your calculation. Now, from the examples we've been using, we said that P1 is 0.6 while P2 is 0.3. So if we add them together and divide them by 2, we are going to get 0.45. That's what we are going to use for our calculation, just a simple average. But then if your groups are unequal, if you want your groups to be unequal, let's say you use 2 as your ratio value in the calculation, that means 2:1. That means the ratio of control per case is 2. That means 2:1. So you're going to use the weighted average. Now this one has a formula and it is on your screen. So if we plug in our values, remember ratio here is 2 and we calculate it, we are going to have 0.4, and that is what we are going to use as our P bar or P star. Now if both cases and controls are equal, that means 1:1, you used 1 in your calculation, you can actually use the same formula. Nothing is going to change. But if you have unequal groups, you cannot use simple average. If you use simple average, the calculation is going to be wrong. So you have to use this formula. Now, I want to draw your attention to something. If you look at some of this formula, you see that some of them have Q bar, not just Q or Q1 or Q2. They have Q bar. Now, if your formula has Q bar, remember I said your Q is 1 minus P. Now, if your formula has a Q bar, that means you are going to do 1 minus P bar. That means you have to have compute this pooled proportion or your P star or your P bar before you can calculate your Q bar. So if you see Q bar, it means 1 minus P bar. Now on your screen are the formulas that you can use for case control and for cohort study, and we've defined all the variables in this formula. But one more thing, for the fleiss formula with continuity correction, you can see that it has n1/4. So that n1 is the output or the sample size that you got from using the fleiss formula. That's the basic formula. Now, after you calculate your sample size, you want to remember to adjust for non-response or loss to follow up. This ensures that your final sample size remains adequate. Now, if you want, you can just plug in your values into this formula, into one of this formula, depending on your study design. Or if you prefer, you can use an online calculator to simplify the process, which I have a video here. But now you know what happens behind the scenes, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.